Line Media presents Business First.
Hi, all, and welcome to a new episode of Business First with Sonia Alleyne. I am your host, and today I'd like to welcome into our studio Miss Lisa Clarke. Lisa, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Sonia.
Absolutely. And Lisa is a jewelry designer. Her company is Accents Accessories. And we want to talk about today, we're going to talk about a lot of things, Lisa, but one of the things I wanted to have you talk about is what was your inspiration for even starting a jewelry line?
My inspiration was I just had a desire to make jewelry. I loved accessories, but jewelry really spoke to me. And I mentioned it to a hairdresser many moons ago, probably I would say about 40 years ago. And she said, "Hey, I know this gentleman that he owns a store. He designs jewelry and he has a great collection of African merchandise." And I met up with him and I started making jewelry from there. And actually I was doing metalsmithing, brass smithing at the time. So he was my mentor and my teacher. And so it was just a desire to get into accessories, and jewelry was my main avenue.
Okay. And what were you learning? How was he mentoring you?
He taught me how to metalsmith.
Metalsmith.
Right. So he's a metalsmither, mostly silver plated and brass earrings, bracelets, and rings. And so that's how I started making jewelry.
Okay. And so you knew right away, a lot of people may have a desire to make jewelry as a hobby, but you had a desire to have it be a livelihood from the start.
Actually, no. To be honest with you, I just wanted an outlet for my creativity. And I wore a piece that I made. I wore a pin that I made. And I worked in retail at that time. And a woman admired it. And I said, you know what? I think I'll start doing this as a small business on the side beside working and going to school at that point in my life.
And what were you studying?
I was studying at FIT fashion design and merchandising.
So this was a natural progression for you.
Right. But the thing is, initially I wanted to design clothing. And so I went into clothing design, but I also designed scarves as I was designing the jewelry. And the jewelry took off faster than the scarves.
Okay. And what is it that you loved about the jewelry that made it so, was it that the jewelry business moved quickly, but what was it that allowed you to say, I think this is the path I'm going to go, and I'm not really going to focus on clothing design?
I think it was easier. It just came easier for me than the fashion design. I mean, fashion design, I still have an eye for it. This jewelry design spoke to my soul, and spoke to me. Just touching the stones and seeing the metals, and it just spoke to me a little stronger than clothing design.
So talk to us a little bit about the type of jewelry that you design, the types of metals, the stones, the pieces that you use to design.
Sure. Well, initially, as I mentioned before, I started with metalsmithing, and that involved cutting the metal, learning how to file it down, learning how to polish it, using the polishing tools, using polishing cloths, and applying the hooks and learning how to, drill a hole. So that was my initial jump into jewelry design. But then just going down the line, just as years passed, I always admired beads and stones. And so I took a gem course at FIT just to teach myself a little bit more about the stones and about gem work. So I segued into using semi-precious stones, which includes rose quartz, chalcedony, which is one of my best sellers, turquoise, coral, aquamarine, what else? Clear quartz, smoky quartz. So I started to use more of the stones Also in combining the stones with the components, or as we call findings in the jewelry business. So I would use brass, I would use silver-plated brass. I started to segue into sterling, utilizing sterling silver, gold fill, and those were the metal components that I used to combine the pieces to make it into an earring or a bracelet or a ring or a necklace. So those are called fillers or findings.
All right. And in fact, I'm glad you said. I was going to ask for the audience purposes the type of jewelry that you make, and so you do everything, all sorts of adornments. So whether it's earrings or bracelets, necklaces, ankle pieces, you do them. You do it all.
Right. I would say from earrings are my bestseller. So from earrings, necklaces, bracelets. I'm still a little soft on the rings, but I do make some rings with metal. I'm still learning how to do some techniques with that. Anklets, and some of the necklaces can be worn as belts.
When did you know that it was time for you to transition? And when I say transition, out of a full-time job and do this full-time?
Well, actually, I got laid off. I was working for a small jewelry firm, and they got bought out by Jones Apparel at the time. And so as I was in management level, product development, and of course, people got laid off, and I was one of those people that got laid off. And I was already doing selling part-time consignments, selling to various jewelry stores or various clothing stores. And I was selling at markets on the weekends. So I said, you know what, this is a great time for me to jump into it and see if I can do it full time. And that was the segue into me doing this full time for over 15 years.
Lisa, one of the things, because you've done this for 15 years, one of the things that we wanted to talk about was how you've been able to do this as a vendor, as a street vendor. And for you to talk about like that process, like, what was it that made you say, you know what, I think I'm going to try, I'm going to set up a table on the streets of New York City and sell my jewelry and see what happens. What was that process like in terms of getting out there and even getting the certifications to do that, or the proper permits to be able to do what you've done as long as you've done it successfully?
So let's see, when I got laid off, I was already doing markets on the weekend. So I continued to do the markets. I expanded the days. So instead of just doing Saturday and give myself Sunday off, I did the whole full weekend if I could find a market that was open. And I went early on when I went to one of these markets that was new to me, one of my vendor mates at the time. So when you do the markets, the market organizer picks up the certifications on the street vending license, etc. So you just have to have your tax ID, which I already had. So one of my vendor mates, she mentioned this market in Soho, and I said, hey, I'm going to check it out. And I think the next weekend I went down and I set up a small table. And at that point in New York City, you didn't need the vending license, which was only supplied to veterans. You just needed your tax ID, which I had. So from there, the city authorities started to crack down on vending and people that did not have a license that was a licensed veteran. So just the backstory, the veterans were allowed to obtain this general vending license so that they can sell on the street or open their own business after coming back to the war or coming back from service. So I started to hire veterans in order to do my business. And again, cooperating and collaborating, I met several other vendors who we would initially split the table, or we would have tables side by side, and the veterans would cover both of our tables, and we would pay them a salary for the coverage. So I think I answered your question. It's pretty much how I started to segue into doing this full time and doing it on the street on a continuous basis, because I was able to, one, hire somebody with a license, so that allowed me to sell. That allowed me 8 foot table, and I was able to generate enough income to pay him a salary and generate enough income to take care of myself.
Well, and that was smart that you thought that you decided to collaborate with a veteran to be able to continue your
Right.
work. What was it like during the day? Like, what was that getting, to your spot at a particular time and being there throughout the day, and you know, working through sales? Like, what was that day like?
No day is typical, of course, but
Right.
it's always you have to get there early because there are other vendors who want to set up, and it's almost a street code where, okay, if a fellow vendor knows that you're set up in a certain spot, most people would respect that. But it's still I would prefer to get there early. That way get my real estate, as they say. But the challenges were, one, the weather, of course. Two, the veteran running late or not showing up. And then you are nervous to open up without having the veteran, because at that point, the NYPD was allowed to take your merchandise or summon your merchandise or confiscate your merchandise, or give you a ticket or even arrest you. So on a typical day when they did show up and everything ran smoothly, it's an early start. I would say I would get there about 7 o'clock, between 7 and 8, put my table out, don't put any merchandise until about 9 when the veteran arrives. And then I start to set up. And of course, at that time, had to deal with my car, parking, chance of getting tickets with the car. And then once you set up, it actually was almost like in Soho at that time. There were a lot of vendors, and it was almost like a mini shopping mall in addition to the small boutiques and stores that are in Soho. And just, setting up, doing a beautiful display, presenting the jewelry, and just, talking up the merchandise, and even if someone didn't buy, it was just always making that connection with the customer, potential client. They would come back. And, there was competition, but sometimes they would come back just because your personality, you had a great price, they really liked the piece, so, yeah.
Right. Because
So
even
I hope I
setting up
answered.
in a way, it's like a brick and mortar where people, because if you set up in the same spot all the time, then
Right.
people would look for you in a particular place, and you would have, like any other sales opportunity, you saying you're developing relationships with
Right.
customers as you go along. How long did you do that?
I say 15 years, but it probably was close to 18.
Wow.
Yeah, close to
Yeah.
18. But
And
then,
what was your cycle like? So did you, because weather in New York City is a concern, were you working all year round? Did you need breaks, not only because of weather, but because of, creativity resets, vacation? Were those all, did you work those things into your work schedule as well?
sure. Actually, the schedule initially, most of us only worked the weekend, and we made enough to take care of ourselves and support ourselves on that. So initially, I worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and sometimes just Saturday and Sunday. Um, and we did that for a long time. I did that for a long time, and then it became more competitive. So I started to go out during the weekdays. So maybe Thursday through Sunday, and give myself 2 days to reset, regroup, make merchandise, resupply, restock, get my creative juices flowing. And then I started to work during the holiday season. So I would say from October through New Year's, I would work every day straight.
Right.
And of course, the weather is a concern. You're selling outside. So I would say if the temperature was above 40, I was there. There was no snow on the ground, I would be there. There have been days where I know that the building is going to, obviously clean. So I knew if I went later in the day, the spot would be cleaned.
Right.
So I was able to set up. So I would really work more, I would say maybe March through December, early January, and then I would take a vacation. There were years where I took 3 months vacation in the Caribbean, and there were years I took a month, 2 months, and in between I would take small trips. But my main vacation was usually February, March, late January, February, and then March, and then come back for April when the season starts to, people are looking for spring designs, or looking at changing over their wardrobe, shopping for clothing, and the spring season starts to open up.
Right. And I'm glad you shared all of that information, because I think that sometimes when people think about street vendors, and maybe that's changed a little bit because we've seen how successful things like food trucks have become. But I think that when people think about street vendors, they think that it's a real hustle, that you're really hustling for this money. And it was actually, for you, it was a very constructive and very lucrative way for you to express your creative interests.
Yes, I would agree with that. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I had a lot of repeat customers. It was, when it was good and we were busy, it was good. And of course you have your downtime.
Right.
But people really supported the designers I called myself a designer. I'm not a designer slash, but my vending was how I made my money. Or instead of having a brick and mortar, as you mentioned, I had a table on the street or in various markets throughout the year, and that's how I was able to support myself. But once you develop a flow, you gain a following, and you build that clientele. I mean, I've had repeat customers that would come back and bring their aunts and buy bridal gifts and bridal party gifts and just, Christmas gifts. And I have customers that come every year to buy their gifts for their woman or their husband. So yeah, it was good. It was good.
And then you had to stop for a minute. And so if you could talk to us a little bit about what made you have to halt your business.
Sure. I was put on pause in 2016, I believe, to 2018, or 14 to 16. I always forget. But it was a 2-year period where I became ill, and I enrolled in a clinical trial up at Mount Sinai. And I was just searching for some kind of relief to my condition at the time. And actually, I'll share this. It was, my eczema became very inflamed, and the doctors couldn't explain it. So I was looking for any option, and there was a clinical trial with a biologic that's now on the market. And unfortunately, it didn't work for me, but I was just looking at diet, and I was looking to go to France to bathe in this particular salt water. And I was just looking for so many options. So that was a 2-year gap where I couldn't think about doing the business. And at that time, stress and the economy was going down. So I think it was a combination of everything. So I took the 2 years off, probably a little bit more, like 4 years. And then I started to, as I became healthier, I started to re-engineer my life. And I segued into going into the healthcare industry.
Right. And so you still did, so as you were healing, you decided to make jewelry design a side business again as you worked for a full-time job, or you looked for a full-time job, I should say.
Right. I decided to make the business less of a priority, and I actually enrolled in certified medical assistant program at LaGuardia Community College. So at the time, I was deciding between entering education, field of education, or the field of medical field.
Right.
And I was an HR. I was hired as an HR assistant for a preschool daycare center. And that was only part-time, but I was studying. So I said, let me just wet my feet and see if this could lead to something full-time. But the medical field spoke to me, and I said, you know what, I'm going to roll in this program. They had some funding there was some funding through the state, and I went for it. So I did a 6-month course at LaGuardia, and I've been in the medical field for the last almost 3 years now.
Right. Which was in a sense perfect timing, because it protected you during COVID, during these last 2 years, where you probably wouldn't have done a whole lot of work vending in New York City during that time. So what do you think that have been some of your, the biggest lessons during this time that you got ill, through your healing, through your re-entering not re-entering, but entering into the medical field and really just pivoting what you were doing?
Biggest lessons you said. Well, I just want to digress for a moment, though, Sonia. Pre-pandemic, I had applied to this market, in Nolita, and this is a hot market. They work March through December. Wanted to get in there. I've been speaking to the market organizer. She says, "I know you're a real business person. You're trying to get in there. You're not just somebody who wants to come and sell for a weekend and then get out." So I spoke to her up 2 years, constantly speaking to her. The weekend that I was first setting up in that market, they accepted me. They had a space. Was the weekend that pandemic hit New York City.
Wow. Wow.
And so I worked there that weekend, and then New York City shut down after that. And then they reopened in July, and I went back, but people weren't coming around. The city was still a bit dead. Few tourists we had, but it was nothing compared to what it used to be. So that was.
And you're talking about when they reopened in July. It was July 2020.
July 2020. Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. The city. Yes. So many people had left New York during that time. The city was, as you said, it was there was no action happening on the streets of New York City at all.
Right. Yes.
So the work that you had done to prepare to go into the medical field was perfectly timed.
Right. And so the biggest lesson for me, and I guess you mean re-engineering my career, or is that what your question is?
Yeah.
The biggest lesson is I think I waited too long and I had already started to look at other careers. I was thinking about becoming a sonogram technician. I had started to investigate that career. I wish I had just pursued it earlier on when I was still making or earning a good income from the jewelry. And I had thought about going back to get my master's. So I just prolonged it. I procrastinated, and I am in a good place now, but I wish I'd done this earlier on, instead of waiting. And also just to keep my creativity going, just to not give up on it. And I just fell out of love with it. Probably because I had so many concerns with my health and just changing careers and wondering if I could generate, an income to take care of myself and support myself. So the biggest lesson is don't procrastinate it. Don't procrastinate, get on it right away.
But I also see that because it all worked out, I think what would be a great takeaway as well for our listeners is that not to be afraid to make the changes that are necessary. Like sometimes you may need to step away from something that you seem to have all your investments in, or all your time, all your passion, that it's okay to step away and take care of the things that need to be taken care of, or even transition and pivot for a minute. And then, because where are we now with jewelry?
Well, currently I am collaborating and co-oping with 2 other designers. And I also do pop-up shops with a friend of mine who has a dance studio in Queens. And she does pop-up shops once a month, twice a month. So I co-op with her, co-oping with 2 other women who are also designers. And we set up in various markets, mostly right now here in Brooklyn, but we have a few that we might do in the city going down the line, but just a few here in Brooklyn so far. And we usually meet on Saturdays and we do those, and we're trying to find a couple of markets for Sunday. So we have a few that we have lined up and we're going to investigate.
And what would you say your goal is for, like, what would be next for Lisa? Is it to transition again? Is it to reinvent herself again? Or are you good where you are right now?
No, I actually am looking at making a handbag, and I developed a sample just to see how it would wear and, see if the print would last and that sort of thing. So I take pictures. I'm a pseudo photographer. I love taking pictures of nature. Mm-hmm. So I have this picture of a monarch butterfly on a pink flower. And that's one of the pictures that I love the most. So I'm going to have that printed on either t-shirts or bags. At least, everybody's carrying a tote bag right now. Reusable tote bags are a hot commodity. So if I can put one of my photos on a tote bag, it might be a good seller. And also I have an inspirational quote, just 3 words. And scarves, I would like to get into scarves again. I may not make them or design them, but I'll probably just buy them.
Okay. So you're still evolving as a creative, and that's what we can expect from Lisa as you continue to grow and evolve.
Right. Definitely evolving. And I want to get back into my metalsmithing. I'm so heavily invested in the beading, but metals, as you know, that are trending, as they say right now. So I'd like to get back into the metalsmithing, and maybe metals combined with my beads or some of my semi-precious stones. So that's what I've been looking into. And also learning how to finalize my rings, get the ring making down.
Okay. So for those listening who are interested in supporting and purchasing your products, your jewelry, where can we find you?
You can find me on Etsy at Accents with a Z, ACCENTZ Accessories, designed by Lisa Clarke on Etsy. And on IG, it is Accents, ACCENTZ, and then my initials, L, M as in Michelle, and C as in Clarke.
Okay. All righty. And what can people find there now in terms of jewelry and designs?
Oh, and I'm also on Facebook. I have a Facebook page.
Okay.
Right now you can find let's say start with IG because I know that's so popular. You can find earrings I'm wearing, which are one of my popular designs. All my new designs are there. In addition to some of the pop-up information that I've had in the past, you can see some of the sites that I've vended at, but you see a selection of my jewelry there on all the pages.
Okay. Well, thank you, Lisa. We look forward to following you. We look forward to hearing about your new interest and your new creative ventures as you continue to grow and evolve. But thank you for coming and sharing your story with us.
Thank you for having me, Sonia. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. And thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week with another great guest. Stay tuned. Take care.
The Business First podcast is hosted and produced by Sonia Alleyne. Associate producer, Ariel Mancebo. Executive producer, Ken Johnson. Find the Business First podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. And on social at business_first_podcast on IG. The Business First podcast is a Mean Old Line Media production.